Thank you for joining us today as we launch the Good Life Initiative. I'm Nick Kremydas, the CEO of the South Carolina Realtors.
And I'm Morris Lyles. I'm the 2021 president of SCR. I'm pleased to be joined today by immediate past president, Owen Tyler, who's going to start by giving a brief overview of the project.
Thank you, Morris. It's exciting. 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
I want to start by running through kind of the purpose of why we did this. We spent a great deal of time hearing from our membership, ensuring that we were able to do the right thing. And the South Carolina Good Life Initiative is a quality of life project focused on promoting the standard of living that South Carolinians desire and want for the future. It's important that we convey that we stand for specific issues that may impact the quality of life for residents across the state. We based the messaging that you're getting ready to see on the results from a survey we did in 2020. Many of you, most of you on that survey participated in that survey. And so this is what you as a membership said. The January 2020 survey results gave insight into what our members care most about when it comes to the quality of life in South Carolina. What were those top concerns? Well, I think we all know them, even if we don't enunciate them. They're population growth, public safety, affordable housing, and education. Other issues dealing with the economy and infrastructure and environment often came up in these conversations when we talk about top concerns. Most of the members, you, believe that your county is reactive when it comes to growth and development, as opposed to being proactive. I want to take a closer look at the top 3 concerns. South Carolina is, as we all know, one of the fastest growing in the country. Number 2 in the move to state during 2020. While most buyers are looking for a single family home, they're unfortunately left out of the homeownership club because of the rising costs in many areas of the state. Buyers are being forced to rent in order to live close to where they work. Those that choose to buy have to live further away from the town center, stressing existing infrastructure and services, and in many cases, long commutes to work. It's time that we get proactive about growth and development in South Carolina. Many of the survey response wanted our legislature to focus on improving education in South Carolina. As realtors, I don't have to tell you what a great school has on an impact of community. You can't have a conversation about schools without discussing Act 388, our state property tax laws. The legislature has been slow to act, but our members want action. Also on the minds of our member is public safety. We all understand the importance of safe neighborhoods, and a small increase in crime can have a major impact and disruption on businesses and communities. SCR launched the Good Life Initiative recently, a few days ago, in a matter of fact, and so you've probably seen it online on January the 11th. But we've been working on this since early 2000. The purpose of the initiative is to change the narrative, to promote the great quality of life that we currently enjoy in South Carolina, but also ensure that these qualities will be enjoyed by future generations. By working together with our elected official, the public, and you, and our real estate community, we can make the Good Life Initiative available for everyone in South Carolina. Thank you, Morris.
Yeah, thank you, Owen. Your vision and leadership have made this initiative a reality. And now I'd like to introduce Tushar Chikhliker. Tushar is the head of the economic development team at Nexsen Pruet. Tushar has been part of some of the state's biggest economic development projects, including Samsung, Boeing, Mercedes, and Nephron Pharmaceuticals. He's our guest today to discuss what to expect in terms of development across our state over the next months and years. Thank you for joining us, Tushar.
It's absolutely my pleasure. And is there a second slide we can flip to? There we go. Perfect. Well, thanks for having me. And I'll tell you that when I learned of this Good Life Initiative that you all, Nick, and your team were putting forward, it really is much needed. Frankly, as a South Carolina lifelong resident, we love living here. We love to sell South Carolina, us in the economic development world. But I think we needed certainly a statewide deliberate action to try and really promote our quality of life in a meaningful way. And then where we have some areas that we need to improve, let's identify those and work to improve those. So the perspective I bring is I work with companies who are considering locating in South Carolina or expanding in South Carolina. So I work directly with the companies and I hear what their concerns are. I hear what their interests are. I hear what the decision-making factors are when they're deciding whether or not they locate here or, God forbid, somewhere else. We have done really well in our state. We certainly punch above our weight class, and certainly from a per capita perspective. But it's a team effort that we've got to push forward. So what I'd like to do is, first I want to again laud your focus on these particular areas, and it's interesting to see the survey results come back with population growth, affordable housing, public safety, and then to a certain degree education as well. These are all things that companies are interested in. Of course, companies are interested in sites and taxes and utility rates, things like that come into making a decision. But they absolutely ask about quality of life issues. And quality of life is it's a lot more to companies and to a lot of us, frankly, than beaches and golf courses and the mountains, as beautiful as they are here in South Carolina. It's about infrastructure. It's about education access. It's about public safety, housing options. These are all things that companies look at. And in fact, there's a whole genre of individuals that work in the space that are called site selection consultants, who work nationwide, internationally, and collect information, including quality of life information about states and countries, and in an effort to provide that to the companies that they represent. So, interestingly enough, we've had 2020 was I'll use the word again, an interesting year for any number of reasons. Certainly COVID-19 really affected us in a meaningful way. What I found interesting was, though, that the overall, and the South Carolina Department of Commerce and others would speak to this as well, the overall project levels that the state was working, from a perspective of attracting business and industry, were really no lower in 2020 than they were in 2019, which I certainly found to be interesting. I would have thought that there would have been a drop down, and I didn't see a drop down. In fact, I saw an increase. But what happened was the way that projects are worked and recruited changed. Obviously, virtual, much like we're doing today, has become a new tactic that has been fairly effective, especially with foreign direct investment. I think the difference, though, however, is the kinds of projects that have announced in South Carolina, the larger ones in 2020 specifically. We're a manufacturing state. We have been for years. It's what we do best. But naturally, with COVID-19 coming, there were stresses placed on the manufacturing growth in South Carolina. But there were areas that really expanded as a result of COVID-19. Life sciences. I mentioned that. One of the slides that I represent Nephron Pharmaceuticals. They're doing amazing things in Lexington County through expanding and investing here in South Carolina with additional production of things that we are going to need, both with respect to COVID-19 and otherwise. Life science is really an area that's been growing. It's also an area that brings employees that generally have a higher net worth or have higher wages from the perspective of purchasing homes. And so, it's been a real effort to onshore back to South Carolina. 90% of antibiotics are made in India and Europe. 96% of active pharmaceutical ingredients are made in China and India. So there's a real movement to try and bring a lot of that back home to South Carolina, really for many reasons, but not the least of which is from a security perspective. We've seen what happens when we're too far away from the items that we need. Another area is food. We worked a project in Hampton County recently that's announced, Agriculture Technology Center, around 1,500 jobs to Hampton County. It is a really interesting multi discipline from a food perspective project that involves distribution center and co-packer, several hundred acres of growing. The idea there with that and other food projects, which you're seeing adding up, that are really popping up on the radar, is it needs to be closer to where the mouths are, the consumers are. So far, a lot of our produce, for example, comes from California, Mexico, and others, and there's just too much of a delay there, especially in these kinds of times when supply is short. So that was one of the reasons that drove the location of that project in an area that so desperately needed it, like Hampton County. Then certain manufacturing has expanded. Naturally, PPE. Everybody's probably heard of that acronym by now. That certainly a ton of projects in that regard. Appliances, home appliances have gone up dramatically. Try and order a dishwasher and see how long you have to wait. Ours broke just before Thanksgiving, and we didn't get ours, our new one, in until about a week ago. So that made for a really pleasant home life experience, but that's for a different discussion. But and then moving on, of course, foreign direct investment. That naturally was challenged a bit. Ultimately, you can do a lot of stuff virtually, like we're doing today, but there's no substitute for somebody hopping on a plane and coming over to South Carolina to see land, to meet people, to take a real look at the site. That closes the deal. Our hope is that some of those restrictions are, I guess the conditions that led to those restrictions are going to lighten up a bit, and that those visits can occur rapidly. So hopefully we'll have a boost in foreign direct investment. Heard earlier, we were talking about the lack of supply, just offline before we started this, when it comes to homes. I see it certainly here in Columbia, and that actually extends to commercial development as well. There's not a lot of product out there. When companies are coming to look at, and a lot of companies want existing buildings, when they come, there's just not a lot to show them. And so there's been a real movement to try to get private development in. There's been a ton of that in the Low Country, in the upstate particularly a lot of distribution centers, for example. But it hasn't so much hit the middle part of the state. There are a couple of developers doing it, but I think it's just a matter of time. But the product, we're just at a shortage right now. Unfortunately, that's not an issue that's unique in South Carolina. I think that's an issue that's facing a lot of the Southeast, frankly. So, but it's something we need to work on. Local communities, I saw the survey results saying that local communities were reactive, or at least folks thought they were largely reactive. I can give you two examples of local communities being very proactive. One would be Lexington County here in the Midlands. That they've really developed a county-owned industrial park and have spent county money to invest in buildings, spec buildings, in order to have them available to companies when they're coming to look. They're not super tailored. That happens after the company locates, but it's a head start, and that's been incredibly helpful in landing two projects there that I worked on recently. Another is Georgetown County, a deal that we've been doing there. They didn't put money into an actual spec building, but they helped create conditions that allowed for private development through other sort of incentives and other things like that. So they're all different ways to approach the issue of product, a lack of product, but it is an issue for sure statewide. And then real quickly, I'm on the board of the South Carolina Economic Developers Association, a few other economic development trade groups and alliances, state chamber, of course, involved in as well. There are three big things, and these line up largely with the concerns of your membership, Nick. And high-speed internet broadband, everybody's heard of that. That is a challenge. I think COVID-19 has done nothing but put a microscope on that with glaring construction lights. And so fortunately, there appears to be a solution in that regard that we as a state are working forward. But again, that's a quality of life issue. That extends to education, that extends to public safety, it extends to employment, workforce. All of that is affected by high-speed internet broadband. Affordable housing, I can't stress this enough. As mentioned earlier, representing a lot of manufacturing clients as I do, it's becoming more and more difficult to get their employees to their facilities because they have to live so far away in order to be able to afford to, in order to be able to afford the residence in which they live. So there's been some legislation regarding affordable housing that came through the General Assembly last session. For example, allows for private development, TIF revenues, tax increment financing revenues, to be used for private development of affordable housing. I think that's certainly helpful. Hopefully there's more we can do, but it is certainly an issue, and it's one I'm glad your members are focusing on. And then workforce, this is a biggie. It used to be an economic development, location, location, location. So if the site worked, if the topo looked good, if the utilities were there, road, water, sewer, there were enough bodies to make it work. That's no longer the case nationally, nor in South Carolina. And it's not just having bodies, it's having bodies with a certain level of acumen and education. Companies are very willing to train on the job, but there has to be a base level of training there in order for them to bump that increment up to where they need it to be. And so lots of workforce initiatives being pushed forward. I know that ManuFirst is one that a lot of us have heard of, but there are others as well that are being put forward by South Carolina Manufacturers Alliance and other groups as well. So that's what we're looking at in the state right now as we jump into 2021. And Nick, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Sure. I know Morris has got a couple of questions. I'd like to start by asking you, there have been some high profile companies that have announced, either hybrid or permanent, virtual work environments. How do you see that impacting site locations now when suddenly sites for some companies, it may not be as important criteria as it was before?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the kind of project we're talking about. And in South Carolina, Nick, we are trying, even though we love our manufacturers and always will, we are trying to diversify our economy and recruit more office headquarters type function jobs to South Carolina. And I think that's where you would see that kind of effect. The manufacturing, there's really, I don't see a change in there's no substitute for being there and assembling something. You can't do that virtually. Now, automation is a different issue that's completely different. But as to the virtual environment, I see that having a temporary blip for a lot of the office space. For example, I'm looking down Main Street right now in Columbia. I see that, but primarily in the larger metropolitan areas, not so much our areas in South Carolina, the San Franciscos, the Manhattans, those areas, Chicago's. I think they're going to feel it. I don't see us feeling it as much in South Carolina.
Thank you. Morris.
Tushar, you mentioned a little bit about, us sort of punching above our weight class, and, what are the things that you think make us different? What are the things that are challenges for us when we're looking at recruiting businesses, and what are some of the things that we can, push to folks and put out in front of them? I know there are probably some commercial brokers on this call, and, when we're bringing people in.
Yeah, so I'll start with the challenges and end positively. I think one of the challenges, and I do a fair amount of international travel, at least I did, and hope to do so again. A lot of particularly foreign companies have never heard of South Carolina. It's just the reality of it. They know general points on the map, and sometimes that, again, this is my home state. I mean, sometimes that's hard to hear, right? Because we love this place so much. And but I think getting them to understand where we're located, why it's so helpful, the fact that we are basically halfway between Miami and New York, the fact that we can reach 2/3 of the population in the entire U.S. by 2 days truck time, like, from a manufacturing perspective. The fact that we've got, low unionization rates, the fact that we've got a low tax structure, at least from an income tax perspective, just getting that education in front of them is of critical importance. And once, and the other thing we always do is we tell them who's in South Carolina, who's figured it out. So we've got some big names in this state. We've got Samsung, we've got Boeing, we've got Mercedes, we've got Michelin, we've got, the list goes on and on of the biggest companies in the world BMW have significant facilities in South Carolina. That gets a lot of people's attention. When they realize, okay, these are companies that have incredibly sophisticated site selection processes, and quality of life being one of the things that factors into that matrix. And they realize, okay, well, they made the decision to come here, so there's something to talk about. So I think the biggest challenge is just getting the education aspect out as far as who we are as a state. Now, I think what makes us, if you look at the announcements in the various economic development trade publications, we're either 1 or 2 almost every year when it comes from a per capita perspective, from an announcements, with respect to the announcements. So I think there are a couple of reasons for that. One of which is the partnership that the economic development community, of which I would consider your members to be a part of that. The tapestry, I guess, that we weave in trying to recruit companies. It's rising tide lifts all boats. Everybody works together collaboratively to try and land these companies, whether or not they end up doing business with you. And that's led by the South Carolina Department of Commerce, the various economic development alliances, the counties themselves, and then others like attorneys and utility providers. It's a network of individuals that works very well together. And you'd be surprised how far that goes. So that's one thing. Second thing I would say is, the things I mentioned earlier about needing to educate companies on, how pro-business South Carolina actually is, and what a high quality of life we have as compared to our competitors. Now, again, we've got work to do. We need to get ahead of it. And I think that's a great thing about what this initiative is pushing forward. It's not all rainbows here. It's identifying some things where we're doing okay, but we could get better. But I think that really is what allows us to really punch above our weight class, as I said earlier.
Thank you. If you could look at the next 10, 15 years of South Carolina, what do you think it looks like?
Oh man, if I knew the answer to that, I wouldn't tell you. I'd go and invest some money somewhere, I think. But here's what I'd say we're trying to do. We're always going to be a manufacturing state. I've said it repeatedly during these remarks. Right. I think the level of advanced manufacturing we're going to have is going to continue to improve. Right. with companies like Boeing, with companies like Samsung, and then their ability to bring tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers to cluster around them. Same with the automotive industry, tire industry. But where I'd like to see us moving, where I think a lot of I guess groups that work in this same space are pushing, rowing in the same direction, we'll say, is with respect to trying to get more headquarters functions here in South Carolina. We've got Michelin, North American headquarters. We need more of that. We've got to, were we going to win the Amazon HQ2, whatever you want to call it, Publishers Clearinghouse sweepstakes? No, we weren't. But there are plenty of regional headquarters that we can locate here in South Carolina. I think we just need to create the soil conditions to bring them here. And that goes back in part to quality of life. Some of the things you mentioned, education, infrastructure, trying to deal with public safety concerns, because on these headquarters jobs, you have C-suite people moving here. They want to make sure that, of course they're interested in their employees, but at the highest levels, they want to make sure if they're relocating, for example, from the Northeast, which we're trying to bring them down here right now, we've got to check a lot of boxes. We can do that, but I think the key is to be deliberate in how we go about doing it.
Sure. Thank you. What, if you hear something from these companies that come in, what's the biggest thing that you hear them go, this is the best part about South Carolina? What's the biggest aha moment that they have, that you hear, 5-10 years after they've come?
So there are two, I would say, Morris. One is when we do the first PowerPoint for them, okay? And it's not the PowerPoint itself, but I see it when we're doing the first PowerPoint, the introductory one. And that's when they see the logos of all the companies that have significant presences in South Carolina already. Those logos are unmistakable. Again, Samsung, Boeing, Google, Mercedes, these are the BMW, these are logos everybody in the world knows. You start seeing the eyes get bigger and say, okay, all right, there's something here. Then when we get them here, we always encourage and push for visits. Again, it's been challenging recently, but we push for visits. And that's when we do our best closing. Because what they always say is, I can't believe how friendly everybody is and how much this state wants our business. We're all humans. These aren't computers making decisions. Sure, there are computers running numbers, but they're humans that are making decisions. And, not to get philosophical, but we all want to feel like we're wanted.
Yeah.
And we do a really good job, because I think it's in the DNA of our state to be welcoming, but we do a really good job with all of the economic development network in making these companies feel like they are wanted, because they are. And that once they come, they're not going to be forgotten. They're going to get continued support, and the local communities do an amazing job with that as well. So I think the first is on the intro. That's I guess the macro, and then when they come and visit, they really get the feeling of what it is to do business in South Carolina.
Sure. No, that makes good sense. It's a great place to live and a great place to be, and they got to want to go somewhere like that. Absolutely. Well, Tushar, I really appreciate you sharing your insights with us. And thank you for joining us today.
It's been my pleasure. And if it's okay, I'll hang around, because I love to hear more about what you guys are doing.
Love to have you. Absolutely.
Excellent.
Next, I'd like to introduce SCR's Chief Advocacy Officer, Lindsay Jackson. She's going to introduce our guest and explain how the legislative process is critical to improving the quality of life for South Carolina residents. Lindsay?
Thank you, Morris. Thanks to everyone that's tuned in today to learn a little bit more about this initiative. We have a special guest with us today, Lee Hewitt, who is a Realtor representative. He represents District 108, which is Charleston and Georgetown counties. Representative Hewitt, thank you for being with us today. We kind of wanted to start bringing you into these conversations. As you've heard a little bit over the past year, SCR has been focusing on having these conversations and taking action on how we can improve the quality of life for the citizens of South Carolina. And as a realtor and as a legislator, I'm sure you can attest that this is definitely going to take some action from the General Assembly to kind of work together to ensure that the state is really offering the opportunity for people to attain the best standards of living possible. So I kind of wanted to get your input on a few questions, and they may sound a little bit similar, but what do you think South Carolina's biggest challenges will be legislatively in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, thank you for having me, Lindsay, and I'm sorry that Representative Kirby couldn't make it, but certainly our thoughts go out to he and his family. God, that's a good question. Legislatively, and going back to what Tushar was talking about, something that he did mention that I ride by every time I go in and out of Columbia was the White Claw facility that's going up in Richland County. I mean, what a massive building that is. And we had Department of Commerce at our budget hearing this week, and kind of got to hear some of what it took to get them to locate. And one was the Palmetto Railways being able to do an extension there. So, good job to y'all and all that y'all do in helping bring manufacturing in. Challenges that he was talking about, education. It seems like this is my 5th year in the legislature. And since I've gotten there, the theme has kind of been, this is the year we're going to reform education and where we are. Well, here we are on the 5th year, and we still really have not done anything with education. I'm hoping that, we sent a bill over to the Senate kind of changed it. It got back to us, and then COVID hit. Hopefully we can pick up with education and we can work to reform that. The one thing that we've already done and passed out of Ways and Means, and it'll be on the floor of the House next week, we didn't pass a budget last year. So we did not include step increases for teachers. Well, we have a bill that will allow the step increases to be implemented again this year, using some surplus funds. And then as we're working on the budget this year, hopefully we can have those going forward. Dollar wise, we've been impacted tremendously by COVID. What was going to be about an $800 million surplus in recurring funds is down to about 60 million right now. But the good thing is we've still got an increase in recurring funds. So as we come out of COVID, the state, because our debt's low, things along those lines, we're going to be in a good position to expand and be able to work on a lot of other things. Transportation, infrastructure, that's going to be key moving forward. We all know, the most complaints I get about roads and the conditions of roads and how crowded they are. We certainly have got a new funding source with the gas tax that was passed a few years ago. Those funds are really starting to come in. We didn't have contractors in the state. Now contractors are moving into the state, so you're starting to see more things done. So I certainly, hope transportation and infrastructure there is going to be taken care of. Driving back and forth to Columbia, you can see broadband being installed in the rural areas at a rapid pace. We also have a bill this year, H 3146, Growing Rural Economies, which is going to expand even more broadband to the rural areas. How is that important? Well, hopefully can get the small industry that's out in the rural area, can help them have access to the internet, can hopefully, increase healthcare, telemed, and all of that, so that it can help recruit industries to those rural areas. And expand the economy out in those, in those areas. So a lot of things going on a state level, working with the Department of Commerce, working with the Department of Education to try and help improve the quality of life in South Carolina.
And thank you, Representative Hewitt. We certainly appreciate all your efforts at the State House to, promote the industry and help us keep moving forward. Kind of kicking over into a little bit more industry specific, where do you see South Carolina in the next 5 to 10 years as it pertains to the real estate industry?
I personally, as I see it, and being in the real estate industry, especially here in the coastal area, there's going to continue to be an influx of people in. Built housing there's no inventory now. The only thing that's really being created is new housing through the national home builders. They're selling projects out before, really, as they're breaking ground, and which is causing problems because people want to move here now, and there's no the inventory of houses that you can buy and move into now is almost non-existent. So they don't want to wait that 8, 10, 12 months for new construction to be built. But as manufacturing continues to grow, as you see people trying to continue to flee the northern areas, they're going to continue moving to the Grand Strand, to Charleston, to Beaufort. Greenville certainly has been seeing some tremendous growth in what they've done with the downtown area. So I just think the future for real estate in South Carolina is great, with the exception of our inventory issues.
So I feel like I would be kind of remiss if I didn't mention COVID right now, since that's kind of the topic that has, dominated us for the last year. How do you think COVID has affected real estate in South Carolina, and what do you think will happen going forward with that?
If you had asked me in March where I thought the real estate industry would be right now, my answer would have been different than what it is. We were talking about inventory shortage. Our sales have almost reached 2005 levels, which is unbelievable. That I never thought we would kind of get there again, but here we are. In the coastal region, I'm also handle the vacation rental side of the industry, and people are still coming to the beach. They want to get out of the big cities. Now, we've seen the hotels up in Myrtle Beach and those areas have been hit in the condo projects, but single family home rentals, we've had people come down there and rent a house for 3 or 4 months here in the winter that normally would have been vacant because their kids are virtually learning. They're doing their job virtually, and they just wanted to get out of the big cities. So we've seen some good off season. But as far as real estate sales, COVID has not impacted it so far. And hopefully now we're going to start to get out of it and get return to normal, so we can start doing open houses and not doing virtual tours of houses, and we can get people and be more hands-on.
Awesome. And kind of to wrap up the questions we have for you today, after hearing the survey results and the things that we found that the membership finds most important right now, what are you finding the biggest concern among your constituents is? And do you find that there's been some overlap with some of the issues that we've discussed today?
I would say listening to your survey results, we're very reflective of what our constituents have. I mean, there is concern from growth because of the impact it's having on infrastructure in this area. Schools, before they finish building them, seem to be overcrowded. Trying to get the emergency services, those type things. People want to know that if they need an ambulance, if they have trouble, or police, or whatever, that they can get help. So, I think your survey's spot on.
Awesome. Well, Lee, thank you so much for your insight today, and we really have appreciated your time. We certainly invite you to stick around for the rest of the webinar, and please feel free to jump in. I'm about to give a legislative update if you hear anything that you want to add on this. But I'll go ahead and jump right into that really quickly for y'all. So it's that time of year again. The General Assembly is back in session, and I've been telling everyone I've been talking to recently that lobbying in this new climate is really new territory for us all, but we're definitely thankful for our relationships with elected officials like Representative Hewitt and others and staff that have really allowed us to kind of adapt to all of these new changes. And I think this project that's focusing on promoting the standard of living and ensuring that we're reflecting, the will of the membership is so important right now as South Carolina continues to grow and to move forward. And I think it's important to convey where we stand on these specific issues and that we are, standing out from other groups on topics that impact the quality of life, especially as it relates to housing affordability, to environmental issues, to public safety, just to name a few. So with these topics in mind, I think that our legislative committee has crafted an agenda that really reflects these values and kind of sets us apart from other organizations to show that SCR is very concerned and wants to be actively involved in long-term solutions to growth and sustainability and other issues that are helping to responsibly drive the state forward. So just very quickly, jumping into a quick legislative session update. The General Assembly went back into session last week. The House and Senate both met in Columbia last week, but they met virtually this week. The session certainly looks a lot different than we have seen in years past. But as for the work of the bodies, it's been pretty run-of-the-mill for the first 2 weeks. I've heard a lot from DHEC on vaccine distributions and Department of Workforce and Employment on COVID response. Not too much going on the floors yet, since both bodies really don't have that much legislation on their calendars, with it being a brand new session. So the House and Senate are planning to return in person next week. All of this is kind of following an interrupted 2020 session due to COVID-19, and the General Assembly was certainly faced with a lot of lingering issues. Santee Cooper, the state budget, just to name a couple off the top of my head. And this is all on top of conducting the regular business of the state this year. So working through redistricting and getting a state budget, and then other various COVID-related matters. So there's a lot on the plates of our elected officials right now. But I do want to mention that while this session looks a lot different, and while there are a lot of important topics before the General Assembly, that SCR is still at the State House, continuing to represent realtor priorities and making sure that our agenda is heard by lawmakers in person, and now also virtually, as a lot of the committees are starting to hold virtual meetings. So our legislative committee has set a 2021 agenda to address some issues, including updating our real estate criminal background check criteria. That's going to include a Social Security-based background check to accompany the fingerprints. working with the South Carolina business community, a group of about 80 different people to support the passage of hate crimes legislation, extending a moratorium to prohibit petroleum pipeline companies from exercising eminent domain, addressing housing discrimination through supporting the removal of discriminatory covenants and restrictions, and providing for more seamless closings through and eliminating gaps in recording through the use of electronic notarization. So these are a couple of the items that we're looking at, and like I said, you know, a lot on the General Assembly's plates, but we're certainly still trying to push ahead and move forward with things that are important to our industry. So just so everyone's aware, I put out a weekly legislative video when we are in session. So stay tuned to your email and to Facebook for those. I'll be updating everyone on the introduction and movement of our priority legislation, and then any other legislation of interest that may come up during the session. And y'all know that things happen pretty quickly at the State House. So as always, please feel free to reach out to me if you need any further information as we go forward into the session. And that wraps up my quick legislative recap. So I'm going to go ahead and kick it back to Morris. Lee, unless you have anything you want to add to that.
No, Lindsay, I think you summed it up great. We have a lot to do, a lot of tough subjects between coming up with the budget, Santee Cooper, redistricting. I would expect a lot of long days ahead of us and a lot of long nights as we move into the session.
Thank you, Representative Hewitt, for what you do for our state and what you do for your constituents in your district. And Nick, I'm trying to think of anything else. What else have you got with regards to the Good Life Initiative?
Thank you, President Morris. Let me recap a couple of thoughts for our members and audience today. So we've heard that South Carolina is an attractive state for manufacturing, for industrial development. We've also heard that South Carolina is the #2 move to state. And for years, we've been in the top 3 category of most popular states to live, work, and play in. The future of the real estate industry in South Carolina is extremely bright. But that also presents us with some challenges and opportunities. Past President Owen Tyler and I sat down, what was it, Owen, more than a year ago, and previous to that, many other opportunities where go to a local planning commission meeting or go to a local city or county council meeting and watch the public reaction to growth and development in many communities around the state. It oftentimes is very negative. The not in my backyard, the NIMBY attitude is very prevalent in many communities. And oftentimes we've heard that realtors, developers, all lumped in together in the same context. And at the end of the day, realtors don't just sell homes, we sell communities. And a community that people want to live in, that they want to raise their family and go to work and play and enjoy recreational facilities, are communities that touch all of the topics we've talked about today: job creation, great schools, preservation, open space, recreational areas, good health care. These are all the things that rise to a level of a higher quality of life. Now, we have to communicate to the public, to our elected officials, that not all development is bad. But we also have to be brave enough to call out that, because sometimes, I know this is going to sound a little sacrilege, so don't hoist me on my own petard here, but not all development is good either. And we've seen examples after the fact of flooding issues and other problems caused by hastily approved development or maybe not as well thought out as it should be, on its impact on local infrastructure, local schools, and local environment. And I think that was the spark that created this initiative. Owen, am I off base with that?
No, not at all. I think that the initiative will hopefully share with the general public and our elected officials what we've always known is that, realtors are the fabric of the community. We sell you where we love living. That's what makes a successful realtor. And change is good, but change has to come with thought and process and planning. And that's what I hope this will do. And Morris and I have talked at great length about it as well. And we're optimistic that this will paint you in a better light, and separate you from the developer, so to speak, which seems to be a bad word in most communities, and let you stand alone, because you are the community, and that's why people call you and use you.
Well, as Tushar and his colleagues continue to bring jobs to South Carolina, those jobs require homes, right? We actually say jobs equals homes. And I didn't mention this, but the number one move to state last year was New Jersey, folks fleeing from New York. Well, once they realize that they've moved to New Jersey, they're going to come on down further south. And I predict we're going to be the number one move to state in 21. And so with that comes a responsibility to future generations. We've got to build strong, viable communities that are inclusive, that are attractive, that are going to be here for future generations, and a strong legacy that we can leave to not only future realtors, but our children and their children as well. Something I'm very, very proud to be a part of. I want to thank past President Owen for launching this initiative. I want to thank President Morris for moving this initiative forward in 2021 and beyond. So with that, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. This has been a wonderful webinar, but before we let you go, I want to remind you, these are all of our social media channels. Please participate by sharing our posts. We've got a great new video that's been launched. I wanted to play it for you today, but I can't get the audio to come through. I'll sort that out, but go to our goodlife.screaltors.org website, and I'm sure you've seen it. We've got it promoted all over Facebook right now. So we hope that you get to see it, and more importantly, share it. The more you can help us get the word out, the more effective we can be, because at the end of the day, the realtor organization, its strength comes from you, our members. So thank you for participating today, and have a great week.